Rain poured down like 1,000 broken dreams that night. The streets were empty, the sky was roaring, and the wind carried a strange sadness. Officer Daniel drove slowly through the dark road, his tired eyes watching the endless storm ahead. He had been on duty for 12 long hours. All he wanted was to go home, take off his wet uniform, and rest in silence. But fate had other plans for him that night. As Daniel turned the corner near an old gas station, his headlights caught something unusual. A broken white van stood in the middle of the road. Its doors were open, and smoke came out from the engine. Daniel stopped the car, expecting to see a driver waving for help. But what he saw instead made his heart freeze. Near the van, 6 small figures were huddled together under the rain. 6 little girls, soaked, crying, and shaking in fear. He quickly stepped out of his car, rushing toward them. The youngest girl looked no older than 3, while the oldest was maybe 11. Their clothes were dirty and torn, their faces pale from cold. Daniel knelt down, trying to calm them. Hey, it's okay. You're safe now, he said softly, taking off his jacket to cover the smallest one. But the girls only cried harder. One of them pointed toward the van and whispered, "They left us. Daddy said he would come back, but he didn't." Daniel's eyes moved to the van again. There was no one inside. No driver, no adult, no note. Just a few broken toys scattered on the seats and an empty snack packet. He grabbed his radio and called for backup, but the signal was weak in the heavy rain. He tried again, but only static replied. The storm was growing stronger. He had to make a decision, and fast. He gently asked the girls where they lived, but they said nothing. Some were too scared to speak. The oldest one finally whispered, "We don't have a home." Those words hit him harder than the thunder above. He looked around, no signs of anyone returning, no other cars on the road. It was just him and 6 abandoned children in the middle of a storm. Daniel felt something inside him stir, a mix of anger and sadness. How could someone leave their children like this? He opened his car door and said firmly, "Get in. It's cold out here." The girls hesitated, looking at each other. Then the eldest slowly took the youngest by the hand and helped her climb into the police car. One by one, they followed, their wet shoes leaving muddy marks on the floor. Inside the car, Daniel turned on the heater. The girls sat quietly, their small faces reflecting in the red and blue lights from his patrol car. For a few moments, none of them spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, one of the girls asked, "Are you going to take us to jail?" Daniel smiled gently and shook his head. "No, sweetheart. I'm taking you somewhere safe." He drove toward the station, but the roads were flooded. Water covered half the street, and trees had fallen near the highway. It was too dangerous to continue. He stopped near an old roadside diner and decided to wait for the storm to calm down. He gave the girls a few chocolate bars he kept in his glove box. Their eyes lit up for a moment, a small spark of comfort in the darkness. While they ate, Daniel looked at them closely. They were all different eyes, different hair, but somehow, they looked connected, like sisters in pain. The oldest girl kept glancing out the window, as if still hoping someone would come for them. Daniel asked gently, "What's your name?" She replied, "Emma." He nodded. "And the others?" She pointed and said softly, "Lily, Anna, Sophie, Grace, and Mia." The names sounded like a small melody of sadness. Hours passed. Still no car came down that road. No one called, no one searched. Daniel knew now, they had truly been left behind. The storm outside began to fade, but inside him, another kind of storm had just begun. He couldn't stop thinking about them. What would happen if he just dropped them at a shelter? Would they stay together? Would someone care for them? He had seen too many cases where siblings were separated, sent to different homes, different towns. That thought made his chest tighten. When morning came, Daniel drove them to the local child services office. But as he handed the girls over, something unexpected happened. The youngest one, little Mia, clung to his leg and refused to let go. Her eyes filled with tears. "Don't leave, please," she cried. The other girls looked at him the same way, hopeful, afraid, and lost. Daniel froze. He was a strong man, trained to handle criminals in danger, but he wasn't ready for this. Their trust hit him harder than any bullet ever could. The officer at the desk told him the girls would likely be moved around while the system looked for foster homes. Daniel nodded, but his heart didn't agree. As he walked back to his car, he could still hear their cries echoing in his mind. He sat behind the wheel, staring at the rain-soaked windshield, his hands trembling slightly. He whispered to himself, "Someone has to help them. Someone has to care." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept remembering their faces, their voices, the way little Mia had held his leg. The city was quiet now, but inside his small apartment, the storm hadn't ended. He looked at the photo of his late parents on the wall. They had raised him to believe that love isn't about blood, it's about choice. And at that moment, Daniel made a choice that would change everything. He put on his uniform again, grabbed his car keys, and drove straight back to the child services office. The worker on duty looked surprised when he walked in at dawn. Daniel took a deep breath and said, "I want to take them home." The woman blinked. "All 6?" she asked in disbelief. He nodded. "All 6. They need someone, and I can't just walk away." It was a decision made from the heart, not logic. The paperwork took weeks, but Daniel never gave up. He visited the girls every day until the adoption was approved. And when they finally walked into his home, 6 scared but hopeful little girls, he promised them something simple yet powerful. "You'll never be alone again," he said. He didn't know then that 20 years later, those same girls would do something so unbelievable, it would leave him speechless forever. But that night, the stormy night when he found them, that was the moment destiny began to write the story of a man who turned strangers into family, and sadness into love. The sun had finally returned after that stormy night, but Daniel's world was no longer the same. He wasn't just Officer Daniel anymore, he was now the guardian of 6 little girls who had no one else in the world. The sound of their laughter filled his quiet house for the first time. The once empty walls now echoed with footsteps, giggles, and tiny voices asking endless questions. But along with those sounds came sleepless nights, worries, and responsibilities that Daniel had never known before. He had always lived a simple life, one man, one uniform, one duty. His days were spent solving cases and keeping order, not changing diapers or braiding hair. The first few days with the girls were chaos. There were toys scattered everywhere, shoes lost under the couch, and crying at all hours. The youngest, Mia, refused to sleep without holding his hand. Emma, the oldest, tried to act like an adult but often broke down when she thought he wasn't looking. Daniel realized quickly, these girls weren't just scared. They were broken inside. He spent his mornings cooking breakfasts that burned half the time and his nights reading bedtime stories he didn't even know the endings to. Sometimes, he just made up new ones. But each story he told was about heroes, about people who never gave up. Because that's what he wanted them to believe, that no matter how hard life had been, they could still write a better story for themselves. The neighbors didn't understand. Some whispered behind his back. Others laughed openly. A single man raising 6 girls? What's he thinking, they said. He'll give up in a week. But Daniel didn't care. He had faced dangerous criminals and endless night shifts. He had faced fear many times, but never love like this. And that scared him more than anything. One day, his boss at the police station called him into the office. "Daniel," he said, shaking his head, "you're taking on too much. You can't raise 6 kids and still do your job properly." Daniel looked straight into his eyes and replied quietly, "If I can protect strangers every day, I can protect them too." The chief sighed but couldn't argue. There was something in Daniel's voice, a kind of strength that came from love, not rank. Still, it wasn't easy. Bills began to pile up. The girls needed school supplies, clothes, food, and 6 growing kids eat more than an army. Daniel started working extra shifts. Some nights he came home after midnight, exhausted but smiling when he saw them asleep in their beds. He would stand by their doors, watching them breathe, whispering softly, "You're safe now." Emma, being the oldest, tried to help as much as she could. She woke up early to pack lunches for her sisters. Lily loved cleaning and made sure their tiny home looked neat. Anna was shy but always drew pictures of Daniel wearing his police hat. Grace loved to sing, Sophie loved to ask endless questions, and little Mia, she loved to follow Daniel everywhere like a shadow. Each girl brought a different kind of light into his world. One evening, Daniel came home to find the kitchen a complete mess. Flour on the floor, broken eggs on the counter, and 6 nervous faces staring at him. He almost shouted, but then Emma said, "We tried to bake you a cake, Daddy." It was the first time one of them called him that, Daddy. The word melted every bit of frustration inside him. He didn't care about the mess anymore. He just knelt down, pulled them all close, and said with a smile, "It's the best cake I've ever seen." That night, he realized something important: being a father wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, even when you're tired. It was about love, not perfection. Months passed, and life slowly began to take shape. The girls started school, and Daniel became their hero. He walked them to class when he could, attended their small plays, and clapped the loudest at every event. Sometimes, other parents stared, but Daniel held his head high. The girls didn't care what anyone thought. To them, he was their protector, their whole world. Still, there were moments that tested him. There were nights when the girls would wake up crying from nightmares, remembering the night their parents left. Daniel would hold them close and whisper, "It's over now. I'm here." Some nights, he would cry too, quietly, when no one could see. The hardest days were the ones when money ran short. He sold his old motorcycle, the one he had saved for years to buy. He took part-time work fixing patrol cars just to keep food on the table. Yet, not once did he let the girls feel poor. "We have everything we need," he would say, smiling as they all sat together around their small dinner table. And somehow, his words made it true. His friends started to notice the change in him. The man who once spent weekends alone now spent them at school fairs and grocery stores, carrying shopping bags full of toys and coloring books. His life wasn't quiet anymore, but it was full. Full of chaos, laughter, and love. There was one moment that stayed with him forever. It was Christmas Eve, 2 years after he adopted them. The girls surprised him by decorating the whole house with paper stars and hand-drawn pictures. When Daniel came home, they turned off the lights and shouted, "Merry Christmas, Daddy." They had made a small tree out of cardboard and lights. On top of it hung a little paper badge with the words, "Our hero." Daniel didn't say a word. He just hugged them all, tears rolling down his cheeks. In that moment, he realized something he had never understood before: this was the family he was meant to have all along. But behind all the love and laughter, a quiet fear grew inside him. He had been feeling tired lately, weaker than usual. Sometimes, his chest hurt when he climbed the stairs. He ignored it, telling himself it was just stress. He didn't want the girls to worry. They had already lost one family, he couldn't let them lose another. As the years went by, Daniel's bond with the girls became unbreakable. He wasn't their real father by blood, but by every act of sacrifice and love, he became more than that. Every time someone called him crazy for what he did, he just smiled and said, "It's not crazy to love." Little did he know, the love he gave so freely would return to him one day in a way so powerful, it would leave him speechless. But that part of the story was still waiting, hidden in the future, just like a gift wrapped by destiny itself. The years rolled by like pages in a quiet book, each one filled with laughter, tears, and countless lessons learned the hard way. Daniel had never imagined that being a father could be this difficult or this beautiful. Raising 6 daughters alone was a journey no manual could prepare him for. Every day brought a new challenge, and every night ended with a new prayer. He wasn't a rich man, but his love was richer than gold. Still, love alone couldn't pay the bills. Daniel worked longer hours than ever before. He started leaving home before sunrise and coming back long after the girls had gone to bed. The dark circles under his eyes deepened, and the lines on his face grew sharper. Yet, whenever he opened the door to their small home, he forced a smile, because he didn't want them to see his tiredness. The girls would run to him, shouting "Daddy's home," and suddenly, all his exhaustion would fade away. For that moment, he felt alive again. But as much as he tried to keep everything together, life was getting harder. The oldest girls needed new school uniforms, the younger ones needed books and shoes, and the grocery list seemed endless. There were nights when Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of unpaid bills, his hands trembling slightly. He'd sigh, take a deep breath, and whisper to himself, "I'll find a way. I always do." Then he'd look at a photo of the girls smiling, 6 faces that gave him strength to keep going. Sometimes, the other officers at work would tease him. "You should have stopped after 1, Dan," they'd joke. But Daniel only smiled. He knew they didn't understand. He wasn't raising them because it was easy. He was raising them because no one else would. Because that night years ago, he had made a promise, and he was not a man who broke promises. The girls, too, noticed the changes. Emma, being the oldest, saw the worry in Daniel's eyes when he thought no one was looking. She started helping around the house, making dinner before he came home. Lily took care of the younger ones, reading to them before bed. Sometimes, when Daniel came home late, he'd find them all asleep on the couch, a book still open in Emma's hand. He would cover them with a blanket and just sit there for a moment, watching them, his heart full of both pride and pain. There were days when Daniel couldn't afford enough food for everyone. On those nights, he pretended he had already eaten at work. He'd tell the girls, "I'm not hungry, you go ahead." They believed him, at least for a while. Until one evening, little Mia caught him secretly drinking a glass of water for dinner. She looked at him with her big innocent eyes and asked softly, "Daddy, why don't you eat with us?" Daniel froze, not knowing what to say. He smiled and said, "I'm on a diet, sweetheart." But later, when she was asleep, he sat quietly at the table and cried. Still, no matter how hard life got, he never let their happiness fade. On weekends, he took them to the park, pushing swings, cheering as they ran barefoot through the grass. He didn't have money for fancy toys or trips, but he gave them something greater, his time, his care, his heart. When they laughed, the whole world felt lighter. When they hugged him, all the pain disappeared. There were tough times at school too. Some kids made fun of the girls because they didn't have a mother or because they all shared one father who wasn't related by blood. Emma once came home crying after a boy called them orphans. Daniel sat beside her and said gently, "Listen, kiddo. Family isn't about who leaves you. It's about who stays. And I'm not going anywhere." Those words stayed with them forever. But beneath all the smiles and encouragement, Daniel was fighting a silent battle. His health had started to fail him. Years of stress, long hours, and sleepless nights were taking their toll. Sometimes, his hands shook while writing reports at the station. Some days, climbing the stairs left him breathless. But he told no one. He couldn't let his girls worry. To them, he was Superman, strong, fearless, unbreakable. He wanted to keep it that way. One winter night, while walking home from work, Daniel collapsed on the snowy pavement. A kind stranger found him and rushed him to the hospital. The doctors said it was exhaustion, maybe worse. He needed rest. But Daniel refused to stay. "I can't afford rest," he said. "My girls need me." The doctor shook his head, amazed by his stubbornness. "You need to take care of yourself, officer," he warned. If you don't, who will take care of them? When Daniel got home, the girls were waiting by the door. Emma's eyes were red from crying. They called from the hospital, she said. Why didn't you tell us you were sick? Daniel smiled weakly. Because I didn't want you to worry. I'll be fine. He knelt down and hugged them all, whispering, "You girls are my strength. I can't stop fighting, not when I have you." That night, something changed. The girls began to realize just how much Daniel had sacrificed for them. They started saving their pocket money to help buy groceries. They cooked dinner together, learned to wash clothes, and made sure the house was clean when Daniel came home. For the first time, they saw the world through his eyes, the endless work, the quiet pain, the love that never asked for anything in return. Despite the struggles, Daniel never let bitterness touch his heart. He taught the girls to be kind, even when life was cruel. He often told them, no matter how dark the night, the sun always comes up again. That line became their family's motto, simple, hopeful, true. Years passed like that, full of small victories and silent sacrifices. Daniel missed birthdays because of late shifts, skipped meals so they could eat, and wore the same old jacket for years. But he never complained. His happiness was in seeing his daughters grow, laugh, and dream. And slowly, his efforts began to bear fruit. The girls became stronger, wiser, and full of ambition. They started to talk about their futures. Emma wanted to be a doctor, Lily dreamed of teaching children, and the others each found their own dreams. Daniel listened proudly, even as his heart ached from exhaustion. He didn't know it then, but every struggle, every sleepless night, every tear he shed was shaping not just their lives, but their hearts. The same hearts that, years later, would return the love he gave them in ways he could never imagine. For now, though, all Daniel knew was that the road ahead was long. But he wasn't afraid. He had faced storms before, and this time, he wasn't alone. 6 small hands were holding his, guiding him forward, one step at a time. Time moved quietly in Daniel's little home, like the soft ticking of an old clock. The girls were growing fast, and with each passing year, the house seemed smaller, but the love inside it grew stronger. What once felt like chaos, spilled milk, fights over toys, and missing shoes, had now become a rhythm of family life. Daniel was no longer just the man who saved them, he was their anchor, their teacher, and their safe place in a world that had once turned its back on them. Every morning started with noise, laughter, arguments about who used the bathroom too long, and Daniel trying to cook breakfast while reading the newspaper. He was not a great cook, but somehow his pancakes, though uneven, were everyone's favorite. "They taste like home," Lily once said, and Daniel had smiled quietly, his heart swelling with pride. The girls had settled into school life, and they were doing well. Emma, the oldest, was responsible and mature beyond her age. She helped her sisters with homework and kept the house organized when Daniel worked late. Lily, gentle and thoughtful, loved reading stories to the younger ones. Anna was shy but clever, she could fix anything broken in the house, even Daniel's old watch. Sophie was full of questions, always curious about everything around her. Grace had a voice that could melt hearts, she loved singing while washing dishes. And little Mia, she was the sunshine of the family, full of laughter and hugs. Daniel watched them with quiet joy. The same girls who once trembled in fear now filled the house with dreams. Sometimes, he'd stand at the doorway, watching them study or play, and wonder how life had changed so completely. There was a time he thought his house would always be empty, but now it was bursting with life. Despite their happiness, life wasn't always easy. Money was still tight, and Daniel still worked extra hours. But he never complained. Every time he came home to see the girls running toward him, shouting "Daddy's home," the tiredness melted away. He'd kneel down, open his arms, and catch all 6 of them in one big hug. It became their evening ritual, one that none of them ever missed. As the girls grew older, they began to notice how much Daniel had given up for them. He never bought anything for himself. His shoes were worn out, his old car barely worked, and his uniform had faded from years of service. Yet he always made sure they had what they needed. When Emma tried to thank him one night, he simply said, "You don't owe me anything. Seeing you happy, that's all I ever wanted." The girls began to do small things to make him smile. On his birthday, they saved their pocket money and bought him a used wristwatch. It wasn't new, but it worked. Daniel pretended to be surprised, though his eyes gave him away. He wore that watch every day after that, telling everyone, "My daughters gave me this." On weekends, they would all go to the park together. Daniel taught them how to ride bikes, how to throw a ball, and even how to defend themselves if they ever felt unsafe. He always said, "The world isn't always kind, but you must be strong and kind anyway." His lessons weren't just about life, they were about heart. One summer, they all went fishing by the lake for the first time. None of the girls knew what they were doing, and the trip quickly turned into a comedy of errors, tangled lines, slippery fish, and loud laughter. At one point, Mia accidentally fell into the shallow water, and Daniel jumped in after her, though she was laughing more than scared. They returned home soaking wet, hungry, but happier than ever. That night, they all sat around the dinner table, eating instant noodles and talking about their day. Daniel looked at them and thought, "This is what family means." But behind Daniel's warm smile, his secret illness was slowly growing worse. His chest pains came more often now, and sometimes he would lose his breath climbing the stairs. He hid it well, taking deep breaths and forcing a grin when one of the girls noticed. He didn't want to worry them. He told himself he'd go to the doctor later, but later never came. One night, while the girls were asleep, Daniel sat alone in the living room. He looked at their framed drawings on the wall, messy crayon hearts, smiling faces, the words "We love you, Daddy." He felt both joy and fear. He knew time was moving fast, and one day they would grow up and leave home. He wasn't ready for that thought. The house had once been quiet before they came, but now, silence felt unbearable. The next morning, Emma found him sitting by the window, staring at the sunrise. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" she asked softly. He smiled and replied, "I'm just thinking how lucky I am. I thought I was rescuing 6 girls that night, but maybe they were the ones rescuing me." As the girls entered their teenage years, the bond between them and Daniel grew even stronger. They began to see him not just as their protector, but as their hero. He attended every school event, even if it meant missing work. When Grace sang in her school choir, Daniel clapped so loudly that everyone turned to look. When Anna won a drawing contest, he proudly showed her certificate to his colleagues. But he also knew that being a father meant guiding them through pain. There were tears, teenage fights, and growing insecurities. Sometimes, one of the girls would shout, "You don't understand," and storm into her room. Daniel never raised his voice back. He'd wait, and when things calmed down, he'd knock gently on their door and say, "I'm still here when you're ready to talk." Slowly, they always came back to him. There was one night Daniel would never forget. The girls had planned a surprise family dinner. They cooked his favorite meal, badly, but with love. When he came home, they turned off the lights, lit candles, and shouted, "Thank you for everything, Daddy." They handed him a handmade card that read, "You gave us a home when no one else did." Daniel tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He just hugged them, unable to say a word. That night, after they went to bed, he whispered into the quiet room, "Thank you for giving my life meaning." Still, deep down, Daniel knew that change was coming. The girls were growing up. Emma would soon finish high school, and the others would follow. Their dreams were waiting, college, careers, their own lives. He was proud, but a part of him was scared. What would life be like without their laughter echoing through the halls? He didn't realize it then, but every lesson he taught, every meal he skipped, every tear he wiped away was preparing them for something greater. The bond they shared had become something unbreakable, stronger than blood, stronger than time. And in the years that followed, when life tested that bond, Daniel would discover just how deeply his love had shaped them, and how that same love would one day return to him in ways he could never imagine. The house that had once been full of laughter and noise had begun to grow quiet. The walls still held the sound of happy memories, but now, silence lingered in the air like a shadow. The girls were no longer little. They were young women now, strong, independent, and ready to chase their dreams. For Daniel, it was both the proudest and the hardest time of his life. He watched them pack their bags one by one, and every time he did, his heart broke a little more. He had known this day would come, but knowing didn't make it easier. The girls were leaving for college, for jobs, for lives beyond the small house that had once been their entire world. He smiled through every goodbye, pretending to be strong, but when they turned away, his eyes filled with tears. The first to leave was Emma. His oldest, his little leader. She had received a scholarship to study medicine in another state. On the morning of her departure, Daniel helped her load her suitcases into the old car. The younger girls stood around her, trying to hold back tears. "Don't cry," Emma said softly, hugging them all. "I'll call every day." But everyone knew it wouldn't be the same. When it was time to say goodbye, Emma turned to Daniel. Her voice shook as she whispered, "I wouldn't be here without you, Dad." Daniel smiled and hugged her tightly. "Go make me proud," he said. "And remember, no matter how far you go, this will always be your home." He watched her car disappear down the street until it became a small dot in the distance. When he turned back toward the house, he felt an emptiness he had never known before. That night, for the first time in years, Emma's room was dark. He stood by her door, touching the frame, whispering, "Sleep well, kiddo." But she wasn't there to hear it. One by one, the others began to leave too. Lily got a teaching job in another town. Anna went to art school. Grace joined a music program. Sophie got into college, and even little Mia, his baby, was growing up faster than he could handle. Each departure left a hole in his heart, and though he filled those spaces with pride, loneliness crept in quietly, like winter fog. At first, the girls called often, every night, sometimes twice a day. They shared stories, jokes, and updates about their new lives. Daniel lived for those calls. He'd sit by the phone, waiting for it to ring. But slowly, the calls came less often. The messages became shorter. Life was pulling them forward, as life always does. Sometimes, Daniel would wake up in the middle of the night and walk down the hallway, stopping by each room. He'd open the doors and look at the beds neatly made, the shelves still holding their old books and trophies. Everything was just as they left it, but the silence hurt. He missed the laughter, the noise, the little arguments over nothing. He spent his evenings sitting on the porch, sipping tea, staring at the sunset. The neighbors often saw him there, the same man who once had 6 girls running around his yard, now sitting alone, lost in thought. Some would wave. Others would stop by and ask, "How are the girls, Daniel?" He'd smile and say, "They're doing great. All grown up now." But when he turned back toward the empty chairs, the truth sank in, he missed them more than words could say. Still, Daniel refused to complain. He told himself this was how it was supposed to be. Children grow, dreams call, and love must learn to let go. But at night, when the house grew quiet, he would sometimes whisper to the empty rooms, "I hope you haven't forgotten me." Years passed. His hair turned grayer, his steps slower. The laughter of his youth had faded into memories. He still worked part-time at the station, though everyone knew he should have retired. "You're getting old, Dan," his chief said one day. Daniel chuckled and replied, "Old, maybe. But not done yet." The truth was, he didn't know what to do without his girls. Every corner of the house reminded him of them. The cracked mirror where Grace used to sing, the old couch where Sophie fell asleep watching cartoons, the tiny handprints still on the kitchen wall. He never cleaned them. He wanted them to stay, like small pieces of love frozen in time. One rainy afternoon, Daniel received a letter, a wedding invitation. It was from Emma. She was getting married. His heart filled with both joy and pain. He couldn't believe how fast time had flown. He put on his best suit, polished his old shoes, and traveled to her wedding alone. When he saw her walking down the aisle, beautiful and glowing, he couldn't stop the tears. She looked like the same little girl who once held his hand and promised never to leave. After the ceremony, Emma hugged him tightly and whispered, "You'll always be my first hero." Daniel smiled through his tears. "And you'll always be my first daughter," he said softly. That night, he sat at the edge of the hotel bed, looking out the window. The moonlight touched his face, and he realized his little girls were truly grown. Over the next few years, Daniel attended more milestones, graduations, weddings, new beginnings. Each time, he smiled, clapped, and encouraged them. But after every celebration, he returned to his quiet house, where no laughter waited for him. Sometimes, weeks passed without a call. He tried not to take it personally. "They're busy," he'd tell himself. "They're living their lives. That's what I wanted for them." But the silence grew heavier with each passing year. He started keeping a small notebook on his desk. Inside, he wrote letters he never sent, one for each daughter. They were filled with love, advice, and stories of the past. At the end of every letter, he wrote the same line, "I miss you, but I'm proud of you." One evening, he was walking home from the grocery store when he passed a family, a young couple with two little girls, laughing as they ran through the rain. Daniel stopped for a moment, watching them. His heart ached, but a soft smile appeared on his face. He remembered his own girls, their tiny hands, their giggles, their warm hugs. "They grew up well," he whispered. "They made it." But as he walked home that night, something inside him shifted. The loneliness he had been ignoring for years finally caught up with him. He opened the door to his quiet house, placed the groceries on the table, and looked around. Every photo, every drawing, every memory stared back at him. He sat down, took a deep breath, and whispered into the still air, "I hope you girls know how much I love you." His voice cracked as he said it, and for the first time in years, he let the tears fall freely. Daniel had given them everything, his time, his youth, his health, his love. And even though they were far away, he didn't regret a single moment. Because deep down, he knew something beautiful: love doesn't disappear with distance. It waits, quietly, faithfully, for the day it is returned. What Daniel didn't know was that far away, his daughters were beginning to realize the same thing. They had not forgotten him. In fact, they were planning something that would soon change his life forever, something that would leave him completely speechless. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Daniel's small house, casting soft light across the quiet living room. Dust floated gently in the air, glowing gold in the sunlight. The photos on the wall, 6 smiling girls and a proud father, had begun to fade with time, but the memories behind them were still alive in Daniel's heart. He sat by the window with his cup of tea, watching the world outside move faster than he could keep up with. Neighbors hurried to work, children ran to school, and life carried on, but for Daniel, time had slowed down. His days were simple now. Wake up, feed the birds, walk to the corner store, come home, and wait for a phone call that rarely came. His hands trembled a little more these days, his hair had turned almost white, and even walking long distances made him tired. But his spirit, though quiet, still held warmth. Every morning, he whispered a prayer, not for himself, but for his daughters. "Keep them safe, Lord," he would say softly. "That's all I ask." He kept a small wooden box on his bedside table. Inside were letters, photos, and tiny keepsakes from his girls, birthday cards, school drawings, and a few notes written in childish handwriting. Every night, he would open that box, run his fingers over each item, and smile. To him, those weren't just memories. They were proof that he had done something good in his life, something that mattered. But slowly, even the mail stopped coming. Months turned into years. His daughters were busy, careers, families, children of their own. Sometimes, they sent messages on holidays, but calls became rare. Daniel understood. That's how life worked. Parents raise their children, and then the children move on to build their own worlds. Still, a quiet ache remained in his heart, a longing that never completely went away. One chilly afternoon, Daniel walked to the nearby park. It was the same park he used to visit with the girls when they were little. He sat on the same old bench under the big oak tree, remembering the days they played on the swings, shouting, "Push me higher, Daddy." He could almost hear their laughter in the wind. A young couple passed by, holding hands with their daughter. She was about 5 years old, giggling as she tried to feed pigeons. Daniel smiled gently. For a moment, it felt like seeing his own girls again. But when the family walked away, the park grew quiet once more, and Daniel's eyes filled with tears. When he got home, he found an envelope in his mailbox, no return address, just his name written in neat handwriting. Curious, he opened it. Inside was a small card that read, "To the man who taught us what love really means. We haven't forgotten. We're coming soon." His heart skipped a beat. He read the words over and over, hands trembling. Who had sent it? Could it be from one of the girls? He didn't know, but hope, something he hadn't felt in a long time, flickered inside him again. The next few days, he kept the house extra clean. He fixed the broken porch light, polished the old family photo frames, and even cooked his favorite stew. Just in case they visit, he told himself with a small smile. Every car that passed by made him look out the window, expecting to see a familiar face. But no one came. Weeks went by, and Daniel began to think maybe it was just a kind stranger or an old friend. Yet, something deep inside him whispered, "No, they remember you. They're coming." Meanwhile, far away, his daughters were planning something big. They had all grown into successful women, doctors, teachers, artists, and leaders, but each of them carried a piece of Daniel's love in their hearts. They talked one evening during a video call and realized something painful. It had been years since they had all gone home together. They missed their father, the man who had given them everything. Emma spoke first, tears in her eyes. "He gave us a life when no one else wanted us. And what have we done? We've let him grow old alone." Grace nodded. "We need to fix this. He deserves more than a phone call." Mia, the youngest, whispered, "Let's give him something he'll never forget." They began to plan, quietly, carefully, with love. They gathered old photos, found their childhood toys, and even called a few of Daniel's old friends. They wanted to recreate their home the way it used to be, full of laughter, warmth, and the sounds of family. Back in his little house, Daniel's health was slowly declining. The doctor had warned him about his heart, but Daniel didn't tell anyone. "No need to worry the girls," he said to himself. "They're doing fine. That's enough for me." One night, he sat by the window again, the sky filled with stars. He whispered to the night, "If they remember me, that's all I need." His eyes closed, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. The next morning, he woke up to the sound of voices outside, laughter, footsteps, and the squeal of a car door closing. He frowned, wondering if he was dreaming. Then he heard it, a voice, soft and trembling, saying, "Daddy?" Daniel froze. That voice. It couldn't be. Slowly, he stood up and walked to the door. When he opened it, his breath caught in his throat. Standing there were 6 women, grown, beautiful, strong, but with the same eyes, the same smiles he remembered from years ago. For a moment, no one spoke. Tears filled every eye. Then Mia ran forward, wrapping her arms around him. "We're home, Daddy," she whispered. Daniel felt his knees weaken as he hugged her tightly. One by one, the others joined, Emma, Lily, Anna, Grace, Sophie, all surrounding him in a circle of love. He could barely speak. I thought you forgot," he managed to say. Emma shook her head, crying. "Never. You're the reason we are who we are." They helped him inside, where laughter once again filled the small house. It felt like the years had melted away, like time had given them a second chance. That night, Daniel sat at the dinner table surrounded by his daughters, just like old times. The food was warm, the air filled with joy, and his heart, though fragile, was full again. He looked around the table and smiled, whispering, "I guess I wasn't forgotten after all." Emma reached out and held his hand. "Never, Dad. You're our hero." For the first time in many years, Daniel didn't feel alone. The home that had gone silent now echoed again with laughter, love, and life, proof that even time cannot erase true family. But what Daniel didn't know yet was that his daughters had an even greater surprise waiting for him, one that would truly leave him speechless. The morning after the reunion, Daniel woke up to the sound of laughter in the kitchen, a sound he hadn't heard in so many years. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. The smell of pancakes filled the air, mixed with the sound of spoons clinking and his daughters chatting over breakfast. He slowly got out of bed, his old knees creaking, and walked toward the kitchen. What he saw made his eyes well up with tears, all 6 of his girls, just like the old days, cooking together, teasing each other, and smiling like they used to. "Look who's finally awake!" Grace shouted, pretending to scold him. "Morning, Daddy." Mia chirped, running up to hug him tightly. Daniel smiled, trying to hold back the emotion. "You girls are really here. I still can't believe it." Emma wiped her hands and turned to him, smiling warmly. "Believe it, Dad. We're not going anywhere, not for a while." Daniel sat down as they placed breakfast in front of him, pancakes, eggs, toast, and even his favorite black coffee. It wasn't perfect, the pancakes were a little burnt, but to him, it was the most beautiful meal he had ever seen. As they ate, the house buzzed with stories. The girls shared everything, their jobs, their struggles, their dreams. Daniel listened quietly, laughing when they laughed, nodding proudly at every success. But something in their eyes told him there was more. They were hiding something. A secret. He could feel it. After breakfast, Emma cleared her throat. "Dad," she said softly, "we have something to tell you." Daniel looked up, curious. "What is it?" Sophie grinned nervously. "Actually, it's something to show you." They asked him to get dressed and come outside. Daniel, still confused, put on his jacket and followed them to the front yard. The moment he stepped outside, he froze. Parked in front of his house was a van, and behind it stood a group of people holding balloons, flowers, and a large banner that read, "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Tears filled his eyes instantly. He looked around and saw familiar faces, his daughters' husbands, children, and even some of his old police colleagues. Everyone was smiling. What is all this?" Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. Emma took his hand. "Dad, we realized something," she said softly. "You spent your whole life taking care of us. You gave up your dreams, your time, your health, everything, just so we could have a chance at life. You never asked for anything in return. But now, it's our turn to take care of you." Daniel's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Grace stepped forward, holding an envelope. "We've been planning this for months," she said. "We all saved up together, every single one of us. And we want to give you something you deserve." She handed him the envelope. Daniel opened it slowly, and inside, he found a set of keys and a small document. His hands trembled as he read the paper. It said, "Property title, Daniel's family home." He blinked in confusion. "This isn't my house." Emma smiled through her tears. "It's your new one, Dad. We bought it for you, together. A place where you can live comfortably, near all of us. It's not just a house. It's our thank you, for the life you gave us." Daniel stared at them, speechless. He looked at the keys in his hands, then at his daughters, then back at the paper. His lips quivered as tears streamed down his face. You didn't have to do this," he whispered. Lily hugged him tightly. "We wanted to. You gave us everything. This is just a small way to give something back. Everyone gathered around, clapping and cheering as Daniel wiped his tears. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. His whole life, he had been the one who gave. Now, for once, he was the one receiving. They all drove together to see the new house, a beautiful, cozy home just a few miles away. It had a garden full of flowers, a big porch, and 6 small nameplates hanging by the door, each one engraved with a daughter's name. Above them, a large sign read, "Home of the man who made us family." Daniel stood there, staring at it, completely overwhelmed. His heart swelled with emotion. "You girls," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You have no idea what this means to me." Emma smiled and took his hand. "Oh, we do, Dad. You always told us love is something you do, not just something you say. So, this is us doing love." Inside the new house, every corner was filled with memories from the past, framed pictures of their childhood, their old toys, drawings they had made years ago. It was as if time had folded in on itself, blending the past and present into one perfect moment. That evening, they all sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. Daniel leaned back, his heart full, his eyes wet. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said softly. Mia smiled and placed her head on his shoulder. "You loved us when no one else did, Daddy. That's more than anyone could ever do." For the first time in decades, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: complete peace. The loneliness that had haunted him for years was gone, replaced by warmth, laughter, and the sound of family again. As the stars appeared one by one, he looked up and whispered, "Thank you, God. You brought them home." The girls looked at him, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. No past, no pain, no distance, only love. But even in that happiness, one truth quietly lingered. Daniel's health was growing weaker, though he hid it well. His heart, full of love, was also fragile. The girls didn't know yet, and Daniel didn't want them to worry. Little did they realize, the next chapter of their lives was about to bring both heartbreak and the most beautiful lesson of all, a lesson that would show that love never truly dies, even when life fades away. The days that followed the surprise were some of the happiest Daniel had ever known. His new home was alive with laughter once again. Every corner echoed with love, every meal was shared with stories, and every night ended with hugs and smiles. It felt as if time had turned back, as if the years of loneliness had been nothing more than a bad dream. Each morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of birds singing outside his window. He would sit on the porch with his coffee, watching his daughters cook, garden, and laugh. Sometimes, one of them would come sit beside him, usually Mia, his youngest, and just hold his hand in silence. They didn't need words. The love between them spoke louder than anything else ever could. But deep inside, Daniel knew something that he couldn't tell them. His heart had grown weaker. Some days, he felt dizzy. Other days, even walking across the room left him breathless. He'd hide the pain behind his smile, telling himself, "Not yet. Let them enjoy this time." One evening, Emma found him sitting quietly in his chair, staring out the window. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Just tired, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But Emma wasn't convinced. She noticed the way his hands trembled slightly, the way he pressed his chest now and then. She didn't push him, though. She knew her father, proud, gentle, and stubborn. He wouldn't want pity. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's health continued to fade. Still, he never complained. Every night, he thanked God for one more day with his daughters. "If this is my last season," he whispered to himself, "then it's a beautiful one." One Sunday morning, the girls decided to throw a small family dinner, just them, no guests. They cooked his favorite dishes, played his favorite songs, and filled the air with love. Daniel laughed, joked, and even danced a little with Mia, though his legs trembled under him. At the end of dinner, Emma raised her glass and said, "To our father, the man who gave 6 lost girls a home and turned them into a family." Everyone clapped, and Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He stood up slowly and said, "No, my girls. You gave me a home. You gave me purpose. You gave me love. If I had to live my life all over again, I'd still choose that stormy night, because it brought me you." The room fell silent. Then, all 6 daughters rushed to hug him at once, tears streaming down their faces. "We love you, Daddy," they whispered in unison. That night, after everyone went to bed, Daniel sat alone in his favorite chair. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence felt peaceful, not empty. He looked around at the pictures on the walls, the memories scattered across every shelf, and smiled softly. He picked up his old notebook, the one filled with letters to his daughters, and wrote one last page. "My girls. If you're reading this, it means I've gone home, not the house you bought me, but a home even higher. Don't cry for me. I had the best life because of you. You were my reason to smile, my reason to keep going, my miracle. Remember this, love is not about blood. It's about the people who choose you when no one else will. You are chosen, and you will always be loved. Forever, your Dad." He placed the notebook back in the drawer, leaned back in his chair, and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for everything." Then, peacefully, with a smile on his face, Daniel closed his eyes for the last time. The next morning, the girls found him there, calm, peaceful, and surrounded by sunlight streaming through the window. The air felt still, yet strangely warm, as if love itself lingered in the room. Mia was the first to cry. "He's gone," she whispered. Emma held her and said softly, "No, Mia. He's not gone. He's just gone home." The sisters sat together, holding hands, tears flowing freely. They didn't speak for a long time. The only sound was the quiet song of the morning birds, the same ones Daniel used to feed. Days later, they held a small funeral, simple and beautiful, just as he would have wanted. Friends, neighbors, and even officers from his old police department came to pay their respects. Everyone had the same thing to say: he was a good man. A true hero. After the ceremony, the sisters returned to Daniel's house, unable to leave. They wandered through the rooms, touching the things he left behind: his hat, his books, his coffee mug, and that old wooden box of memories. Inside it, they found the notebook. As Emma read the final letter out loud, no one could hold back their tears. But when she finished, something strange happened. The sadness began to lift. The pain turned into pride, and the tears into smiles. Lily said softly, "He may not be here, but everything we are, is because of him." Anna nodded. "He didn't just raise us. He made us who we are." From that day on, the sisters made a promise to live their lives the way their father had taught them, with kindness, strength, and love. Months later, they turned Daniel's home into something special: the Hope Haven, a shelter for abandoned children. The same kind of place where their story had once begun. A place where every lost child could find a family, just like they had. On the opening day, Emma stood in front of the crowd and spoke through her tears. Years ago, one man took in 6 unwanted girls and gave them love. Today, we honor him by doing the same for others. His name was Daniel, our father, our hero, our hope. The crowd clapped, and as she looked up at the sky, a gentle breeze brushed her face, warm, soft, and full of peace. It felt like Daniel was there, smiling down at them. That evening, as the sun set, the 6 sisters stood together outside the shelter. The golden light painted the world in shades of orange and pink. Mia whispered, "Do you think he's proud of us?" Emma smiled, eyes glistening. "He always was." And in that moment, as the wind carried the sound of children's laughter through the air, they knew the truth: Daniel's love hadn't ended. It had only begun again, through every child they would help, every life they would touch, and every heart they would heal. He was gone from their sight, but never from their story. Because heroes never truly die. They live on, in love, in kindness, and in the hearts they leave behind.